We are discussing about the Africa Continental Area and that it has started operating, and any trade transactions going on in Africa should ideally go through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area framework. So, Mr. Biko, if you could introduce yourself and possibly start by speaking about what is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area aiming to achieve, and what does it mean that it is now operating?
My name is Kobia Biko. I've got a background in language, English language and literature, as well as law and business. That's my background. And, I've been on the Africa Asia platform discussing a few things as regards Africa. And this is a very great opportunity for me to be invited again to talk about issues surrounding the Africa Free Trade Area, which has been launched on the 1st of this year. The question which I've been asked to deal with is, what does the launch mean? What does it mean, the African Free Trade Area? For me and to most of the people, it will mean that we are moving into, after spending so much time within the political domain since African states started getting independence and becoming republics. So it means that we are on our way to creating a massive employment for our youth and women. It will mean also we are on our way to increasing our capacity in terms of increased salaries. We are on our way to have manufactories. We are on our way to competing with other entities. When I mean entities, I'm talking about economic entities like China, economic entities like India, economic entities like European Union, and economic entities like America or North America. But more importantly is that we have got our mojo right. We have got things right. And African as an entity by itself is going to see to it that we first and foremost eradicate poverty by increasing incomes across the board in all households in Africa. So for us as Africans, is a moment to treasure, is a moment to celebrate, and is a moment where we can say, really, after all those struggles, we have come to a point or a tipping point where we have nothing else to do except jump into the water and swim with the sharks, if you will. So that is my understanding of the launch of the African Free Trade. Eradication of poverty for me is the number one obligation of the African Free Trade Area.
Okay. And those are very good comments, Biko, especially with regards to like the potential quantity of trade that's going to go through with the free trade area. And the Egyptian president is the one who, like, speaking in the context of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, was noting that the eyes of the world are turned towards Africa, and for good reason, because like once the free trade area is operating, then there's huge potential for what Africa can do for itself, and that impacts the world. So of course the eyes of the world are turned towards Africa. So Joel, tell me, what are your comments about that? Like, especially now that it looks like Africa is catching the attention of the world, and this time round it's almost like for the big potential that it stands to realize through the free trade area.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. And as Rich, I'm joining late by quick introduction. Joel Moura, a finance and accounting professional working in Bermuda. I'm currently working in the insurance regulation sector. And I'm a keen student of life when it comes to matters development agenda. And I think my colleagues have clearly indicated the importance of this agreement, especially in the area of developing Africa and moving things forward in Africa. The question of the eyes of the world are turned to Africa, as the Egyptian president observed. I thought it is a great question, or it's a great comment to come from the African Union as an organization, because then really kept me thinking, if the eyes of the world are turned to Africa, then I think the bigger question that we really have to ask ourselves is where the eyes of Africans themselves turned towards. The question is then, why is the world all of a sudden turning towards Africa? I mean, if you listen to the main channels, news, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, or the others, you will hear them talking about the Africa we have known as we grew up, which was associated with all sorts of negative descriptions. I think Kobe mentioned about illiteracy and poverty. We have heard about diseases, hungers, famines, water shortages, poor housing, slums. We have Kibera, Soweto to be proud about, and Mathare in Nairobi. Interstate wars, civil conflicts, AIDS, name it. Anything negative you can associate with the human existence has always been associated with Africa. And mention, of course, the area of corruption, definitely saying a lot. But then the question still remains in my mind, all of a sudden, what has changed? Again, what is doing about this? We have had the comments in the main media as well as amongst Africans themselves, talking about the second scramble. Sometimes I wonder whether it's the second or the third or the fourth scramble we are talking about, not certain where that is. But we are aware at least of the 1884 Berlin Conference, where the Europeans did sit in Berlin, shared out Africa as a cake on a table amongst themselves. Everybody, ended up with their portion. And what about Africans? They had nothing to scramble for in that first sitting. So the question then becomes, in the second scramble, are Africans actually scrambling for their mother? Is it going to be another scramble for their own motherland, right in their presence? Sometimes not even aware of what's happening, and sometimes, not really even understanding what the implications of that are going to be in the medium term, as well as the long term. Just a quick introduction of Africa. What is Africa? So Africa is actually one continent. It's, a great variety of people, 54 countries plus disputed areas, that's Somaliland and Western Sahara. And geographically, it is the world's second largest continent after Asia, covering 3 million kilometers, 7.7 square kilometers, or in percentages terms, that's 6% of the surface, covering the water and land. Just on a look at the land itself, is 20% of the Earth's land. We are about 17% of the world's human population. And this population, what's also interesting about it, is as a whole, it is a very young population. It's 60% of that population is aged below 25 years. And this makes it the world's youngest population. Africa is actually the youngest continent amongst all the world's continent, with a median age of 18 years, whereas the world's median age is about 30 years. And comparing to the rest of the continents, Europe is about 42 years old. North America has a median age of 35 years. Asia has 31 years. South America 31 years. Oceania 33 years. And what's even more interesting when you look at that is that the continent that you pick on average in the world today is 13 years of Africa. So Africa in real terms, when you look at the population, is that it's really higher when it comes to the age of the African dwellers. And what is even more interesting about the Africa population is that in year 1 Africans are of working age, and by 2050, about half of the African population is projected to be under 25 years old. And like I have mentioned, most of that population is pretty young. The population lives about half of it, or about 43% lives in the urban areas, which is expected to be about 50% by 2030. And so just listening to those statistics, a young population, a healthy population, a population that is ready to work, it's living in the urban areas, about half of it by 2030. What does that mean? For any business mind or entrepreneurial thinkers, as well as policy thinkers in the world, then they look at all that mix of factors and they say, well, the economic future of the world is actually in Africa. And I think this is what it's turning towards Africa, where that 60% of the world's Arab is enough, which represents billions of potential investment feeding Africa. So literally, Africa can feed the entire world. And one last fact about Africa, which we all know, but we tend to assume, is that Africa is really the cradle of humanity. It's also the cradle of human civilizations. So every single civilization you see on the planet, every single human being you see on the planet, literally, we have Africa as our mother in the real sense. So I think that kind of gives us a quick introduction to our very own motherland, Africa. So I kind of tend to now see why the rest of the world would actually have their eyes turned towards Africa. They see opportunity. They see the future. You see great business opportunities for themselves and for their future generations. But what about Africans?
Well, Joel, those are really good observations and comments, especially with regards to like the world is looking at Africa based on those facts that you've said and the potential that it holds. But then the question is rightly, as you put it, where is Africa looking? And hopefully through these discussions, we can shed some light on why the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is such a big deal. So, Biko, if I could ask you, what would people expect from this, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area? Do we expect lesser migration restrictions? Do we expect faster clearance of imports and exports? Ideally, assuming that the implementation is one thing, because the agreement looks good on paper, but the implementation of it is, of course, going to be paced. But what's the expectation that should be in our minds now that this is happening?
Yep, I'll probably give it a first shot. I think those of us from Kenya are very familiar with the events at the border between Kenya and Uganda, which I believe is a random representation of what goes on a lot in other African countries in terms of hold-ups, sometimes unreasonable, in terms of the clearance of goods coming from Uganda to Kenya, as well as from Kenya to Uganda. And sometimes some of those goods are going all the way to Congo. And there's sometimes other countries like Rwanda, Burundi, and other Central and Western African countries. So I think the first and most immediate impact that really, I think it would be fair to expect if African countries are really serious about what this African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement really stands for, is an immediate commitment and immediate implementation of a faster clearance of imports and exports of goods across all African borders. So any holdups that have been contributing to those, any factors that have been contributing to those holdups, whether it's factors arising from bureaucracy of the customs between the two countries, the staffing of those clearance functions, corruption in the clearance process, then those are the elements to quickly jump on and really you sort of one quick signal to say, hey, we signed this agreement and we mean business and we are committed to it. The other thing that I think would be reasonable to expect would like to see probably associated with the faster clearance, then countries taking measures, the movement of people between borders, whether it's business people, whether it is professionals, whether it is tourists or students moving across borders. We definitely would like to see African countries making it as easy as possible. I know some countries, for example, have started working on saying visa on arrival for people from the rest of Africa. I think that would be a good point, but eventually we definitely want to see probably a visa-free travel across the entire of Africans for Africans and hopefully eventually for all other people in the future. So I think those two, I think, would be my most immediate expectations. I think in the long term, the bigger elephant in the room in terms of expectations is a shift of attitudes towards Africans themselves, towards each other. How do we look at each other, for example? How do we look at an African, for example, from the Sahel region or from West Africa or from South Africa? or even how do I look at my fellow Africans from East Africa region, Ethiopians, Somalis, Tanzanians, people from Malawi, Uganda, Rwanda, Congo. Like these are people we have not previously interacted very well with, just because of the colonial legacy and the siloed countries and colonial borders that we definitely inherited from the 1884 Berlin Conference. However, if this trade agreement will mean anything for all of us, then I think the question of change of mindsets becomes then I think the bigger question that we really have to start working on. So we definitely should expect at all levels on the continent, whether we are looking at individuals like ourselves, professionals like ourselves, family discussions, county government discussions, whether we are looking at municipal discussions or even national conversations, the presidents themselves who sign these agreements or their trade ministers must be really the first custodians, as well as the people who are spearheading the process of changing people's mindsets and attitudes towards each other, as well as towards the prosperity of Africa and the trading processes and the integration processes really associated with that.
Okay, and so thanks for that, Joel. And if I may ask, Biko, if you can hear me, or one of
I can.
you can. Okay. Tell me, what do you think would count as success for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area? What do you think, looking at 6 months down the line, looking back to this, you'll be saying this is success? What will you be looking at? Is it trade volumes? Is it the amount of movement of people, or what would count as success?
First of all, I appreciate so much the breakdown of statistics which Joel has enunciated a couple of minutes ago, and they have given us a clear view of Africa as a continent. They're very much appreciated, because those statistics give us a very good, understanding of what we're dealing with in terms of population, the demographics breakdown, the statistics all together. When you ask yourself about what could be seen as success for the African Free Trade Area, there are many things. Let's say 6 months down the line, you have indicated. 6 months down the line, we should be able to see, as we indicated, trade volumes. And more importantly, is to see that governments are giving more impetus to the law and the letter of the African Free Trade Area. Why am I saying that? Is because if we have, as you said, a very good document on paper, but we are not going, that's just theoretical, we are not accepting it to implement it or in practice, then we will have shortchanged ourselves. If we could see that goods are moving, there is no that glitch which you find at the border of a lot of trucks which are there. If you continue seeing new border posts and fast clearance of goods and as well as people moving from one country to the next, when we start seeing bringing down or the crumbling of barriers like the visa regimes, especially to some countries which are very tight on that, like South Africa, where I am at the moment, they are very strict visa regimes, and they have to bring that down so that they can allow more movement and people. Most of the countries in Africa are very protective of themselves. These protections which have been put in place in terms of tariffs, compliance, and legal processes are the ones which have contributed so much to poverty levels in Africa. One thing which we should be seeing 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line, is the relaxation of tariffs, whereby the milestones which have been set by the document, the Africa Free Trade document, should be seen that they are being achieved. not only on paper you say, no, let's say, for example, Uganda is willing to accept the tariffs and all those kind of non-tariffs, relaxation and everything. But all of a sudden, you go down 6 months down the line at the border, you find now it's just business as usual. So that one should be the measure, should be a very important measure in terms of a milestone. So 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line, we should be seeing more factories being set, more business people traveling. We should be seeing more trade volumes. We must see, people are taking up the African, the African passport, which was mooted, and I think it came out, it was given to the African chairman that time. We should be seeing a lot of things which are happening in Africa. And I've just mentioned a few, but I think also other panels have got other things which they could be talking about. But in the long run, like 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, we should be seeing people's livelihood change. The living standards are good, roads are being built, the railways are being built, wars and areas of conflict are no longer there anymore. Because one thing is that the more people become economically empowered, the more they think less and less about conflict. Most of this conflict you see is sharing of resources within their republic or their state. But once the trade is open and everybody is moving all around, people are able to make money in different ways, then we can see that the war is gone, right? The conflicts are gone. Then these are the milestones you could be looking at in the 10 years down the line. But in the short term, we should be looking at, as you said, trade volumes. We will see relaxation of tariffs. We will see more write-ups about African free trade area. Journalists, talking about how businesses are open in Burundi, how businesses in Chad, how they are in Angola, and that kind of thing. This is some of the milestones and signposts we should be looking at, indicators for the, that African free trade area as a concept is working and it's been meant to work. It's been put on the ground and it's working. These are some of the things which I would, point out.
Thanks, Biko, for those observations. Quite good observations that you make there, So if I could turn to Isanda and you speak a bit more about your observations on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, what do you think about it?
Thank you, Christine. And I would say I'm very overly the optimist about this new agreement, but I would say it's good that we give it a chance to see how things go. And the reason why I'm saying that is because if we look at the agreements that Africa as a whole have gotten into in the past and how they have implemented, it's not very encouraging. For instance, the Maputo Declaration of 2008, where African countries all agreed to spend more than 10% of their, at least 10% of their budgets on agriculture. So far, I think we have only 8 in 2020 that are now fully compliant. And let's say a bit of like 26% of the rest that are between 5% and 10% spending that's as a percentage of their GDP spent on agriculture. Before, we also had the Yamoussoukro decision, which was like the decision to open up airspace so that Africans don't have to fly to Europe, so that they come back, to another African capital or something like that. That's still, I don't think the implementation has been done as we speak. So we tend to see there's so many stumbling blocks when Africans decide to do something. Another example I'll give closer home is the East Africa community, which, collapsed in 1977 and then revived in 2000. And since then, you would see there's ups and downs, which of course is expected. But I think it's a lesson for all of us to know that all we are expecting, all the good things we are expecting that will come with a free trade area might not actually come easy. There will be lots of pain and there will be, ups and downs. And most of these, I would say, is a factor of governments and how they are structured. The people as a whole, Africans as we are, I think we are willing to work together. If you look at art, which is not bound by the politics. So by art, I talk of things like music. You see Diamond collaborating with South African artists, and you see a Ghanaian artist singing with Nigerian artists. They are not bound by these colonial boundaries, meaning the people sort of are okay, working and doing things across borders. But governments come in and say, okay, for you to cross over, you need this visa, you need this, and it becomes really difficult. So I would say some of these protectionist attitudes that our governments have will probably linger on for some time, and maybe for some reason it could be justified because, for instance, why would so let's say we have signed a free trade agreement, Kenya and Uganda. Then Ugandan farmers bring their eggs and they are costing, say, 20 Kenya shillings per, let's say, what's it per egg? No, per egg, let's say they are costing 8 shillings. And Kenyan eggs are probably costing 15 because of the various tax regimes in the country that make the farm inputs higher than in Uganda. So you see Kenyan farmers complaining, why are eggs coming from Uganda and we don't have market for our eggs here? So the fact that so many African countries produce the same goods and services, and therefore we are in competition rather than complementing each other, is going to be, I think, a point of conflict as in terms of the trade and opening up. Most countries will be skeptical and unwilling to open up their borders because they'll be saying, oh, our industries will die. What will happen to our farmers? That kind of thing. But if we were courageous enough to move forward, industrialize, develop the infrastructure early enough, this wouldn't be such a big problem because it would have been, people have learned to diversify early enough. Because, for instance, I read somewhere like 5 years ago that majority of the food that is consumed in Congo Brazzaville comes from France. As much as Congo Brazzaville is in the equatorial zone, they receive all the rainfall and stuff, they still import most of their food because they rely mostly on oil. So there's really not so much agriculture going on. So for instance, 1 kilo of meat in Congo Brazzaville is the equivalent of 1,000 Kenya shillings. In Kenya, 1 kilo of meat is probably 400 Kenya shillings. There were that time the flights from Nairobi to Congo Brazzaville, Kenya Airways was operating 3 times a week to that destination. But still, no one was, sending meat over there. Yeah, flowers, no one, even tomatoes. They import everything from France. So still, we will find that it's not easy. There's a ready market there. We have the goods here. We could supply them, but there are still some legacy establishments in place. So, for instance, you don't know who is supplying the meat in Congo Brazzaville and who they are connected to politically, and therefore they might not allow a new entrant from another African country to come and disrupt the current setup. It's some political, hurdle to overcome. So that's one of the things. So the major problem we will have going forward for me is the political setup. And then the other one is the rule of law and safeguarding of contracts. So for instance, in the European Union, trade between countries in Europe is at 60%. In Africa, for whatever reason, we are at 16%. So if someone in Czech Republic sends some goods to England, they expect to be paid probably within 1 month. And if they are not paid, they can go to court in either London or in their capital city, and their case will be heard, and ruled fairly. So they know that a contract that they have signed between a supplier in Czech Republic and the person receiving the goods in London will be honored because the courts can enforce the contract. What about, are we able to say that we have the proper court systems that can be able to safeguard contract, rule of law, property rights? You know, will I send my goods seated in Nairobi to Luanda in Angola and sit and wait for payment? You know, or will I go there and then they tell me try and see? You know, that kind of thing. So that is going to be a big problem. And I'm sure even without the Africa Free Trade Area, if we had rule of law, safeguard, laws that safeguard contracts and property rights, would be trading much, much more. And I'm speaking from experience. I've done business between Tanzania and Kenya before, and things happen. You know, you get to a point where you supply goods. So I used to supply fish. I used to take fish from Mwanza in Tanzania and sell in Nairobi. So I'll come to my people in Nairobi and, they'll say, okay, we won't pay you now. Come tomorrow. I come tomorrow. They tell me, oh, we don't have money today. Come tomorrow. And the story will go on until today. Since 2009, I'm still owed money by this thing. I can't take them anywhere. No one will listen to me. I have no recourse. So it becomes a problem when you cannot enforce contracts, when the codes are not in favor of business, and when you are not sure who is going to defend you on the other side, which is the other country, if you have a problem. Will the police be on your side if something happened, or will they side with this person from this other country? So these are some of the hurdles we'll have to overcome going, and that's why I have some skepticism as to where we are headed, this free trade area. And the last thing I would say is, if we compare ourselves with other parts of the world that have implemented such agreements or similar agreements, can we say we are where they are when they started? So, for instance, the ASEAN, the Asian Tigers, they've been doing their trade. I think the level of trade between them is about 45%. When they signed this agreement, I don't know the exact time. Are we at the same level? Are we at the same level in terms of our organization, our preparation, and everything as they were, so that we can predict how successful we will be? Or can we say, okay, fine, we are unique. We should not be compared with other people. We will make it in our own way. I'm not sure, but maybe the parting shot for me is, I'll be very cautious to be too optimistic about it, but I won't brush it out altogether. I'm sure some countries will find a way to work better with each other, but there'll be issues between other countries. So, for instance, Somalia and South Sudan, if you want to implement free movement of people, and countries like those that probably don't have a well-functioning government, how safe feel welcoming people from those countries, So it's those kind of things I'm looking at.
Okay. Those are like such good comments. I mean, honestly, especially like when you speak about like the rule of law, and especially contracts. I mean, like the judicial systems within Africa, they will need to function. And even if the protocol on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area provides, especially for like some dispute resolution, especially with regard to the agreement, but the court systems have to function. And within Africa, one of the biggest problem is interference by the executive, by the presidents with the judiciary. Like the judiciary, like the appointees are president's appointees, and the president has problems with it if you don't do his bidding. But I think those are really good observations. And I think we have gotten into the side where the question that we were to discuss next, which was like some of the uh, things that will challenge the achievement of the goals of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which I think you have highlighted very well. And I know there are quite many more that can be addressed. But Biko, if I could ask you, do you, and especially taking with what Isanda said and any other thoughts that you had on the potential for like potential challenges, what are some things that might have been done or that you have observed that might give us smooth sailing to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, no matter how small? Like, what are some of the small or big things that could be observed as potentially pointing to potential for success despite the many failures of other regional economic communities in Africa?
Well, the African Free Trade Area is being introduced to a skeptic, kind of a population, because Africa has had many stats and stuff. So it's really a good thing of, the fact that there are people who are a little pessimistic about the African Free Trade Area. I would as well identify with the concerns about being pessimistic about the African Free Trade Area. But as you look at it, you look historically, from the time Africa was granted independence by the European powers, there was a lot of naysayers, right? And the people who painted a very gloomy picture about the African republics and states. Some of these came to pass. Others were not really on target. And Africa's thrived in spite of all those concerns. What I would say is that if you look at some successes of the countries which got independence, that's a very good pointer that we can be left on our own means and be able to take care of our own business. Mm-hmm. Although cases of failure are there as well. Mm-hmm. So either the optimist and the pessimist are all have this. They share almost halfway the concerns about Africa. But with the coming of success stories like countries like Botswana, Mauritius, Seychelles, countries like Namibia, and other countries which have been successful after they got their independence, that's just something to encourage the African Free Trade Area to carry on. Mm-hmm. There is also a point of the preferential trade areas, ECOWAS, the East African Community, the SADC area, customs union like SACU and COMESA. All these have been formed, and they have faced all those challenges you mentioned about. Some of them are almost in a collapsing stage. There was a betrayal of the East African community in 1977, as it was earlier pointed out. Why? Because of betrayal. Now, when they got the things right and they got the legal processes right, now we have another new East African community. Now, the challenges are there, but the pointers of success are even more pointed, if you will, because we have seen much failure as well as much success in Africa. So we should more look at the way in which we can add, especially the 2 points which were raised about politics and the legal processes. Those areas must be addressed first and foremost. And I think with the African Free Trade Area, the document calls for, in the first phase, it calls for trade in goods and services. And plus the other element which must be addressed is legislation, which was a big concern. How do you, because if you are a trader from, let's say, Zambia, you send things out to Tanzania and the people don't want to pay you. How do you address that matter? It's not easy because the jurisdictions are different. But then they have moved pretty quick to understand that concept is going to limit, it's going to put this whole concept of the Africa Free Trade Area in the dustbin if it's not addressed as a matter of urgency. So there are a lot of teething issues to be addressed. There are so many things you can point like they are going to make this whole concept of Africa Free Trade Area fail. But there are many pointers to the successes of Africa, not least about the successes and the struggles of the republics until they are able to get democracy, and then single party dictatorship, then multi-party, and now democracy, where ethnic groups can be able to have and kind of a semblance of share in the resources. That's a very big plus right there. Then we are looking at as I said, preferential trade areas. They have been struggling as well. They have come up with a lot. ECOWAS wanted to come with a currency. Of course, you cannot have a free trade area without a currency. So these things are being addressed, and they will be addressed. My hope is that the document is good enough to have learned from all these preferential trade areas in Africa, as well as copy from the European Union and ensure that the document they're coming up with and what they're going to roll out, which from the first of this January 2021, is going to cater for every other anomalies and little teething problems which have been there before. But I'm very optimistic that this will be done because at this age, we are able to know what can bring failure, and we must take care of that.
Those are very good observations. And Joel, if as we come to a close, if you could, speak a bit more about other observations that you have made on like the potential challenges for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And well, there are really good points that Vico has said. There are economies that are doing well. There is learning from failures, and like the EAC has picked up, and think like SACU is the oldest customs union in the world. It has existed for such a long time. I forget how many years, but it features among the oldest in the world. So, but also, when you look at realistically the challenges, in addition to what Isanda said, what do you look at and think this really need to be addressed from your point of view?
Yeah, thanks again, Christine. I actually appreciate the comments from Isanda as well as from Kobia. Definitely for a balanced view of what to expect from this AfCFTA, definitely have to look at both sides, the optimists as well as the pessimists. Definitely, I think on a good day, the pessimists will have a field day given what we have observed historically in Africa, as well as listening to a lot of individuals and what they really think about Africa, including us Africans ourselves. However, I think I always bear in mind that success is never a walk in the park. I also bear in mind the fact that success is always the fruit of a lot of failures. So I think the question in my mind right now is how ready are Africans, ready in their mind, in their attitudes, to be able to deal with all the failures that will come with trying this journey of getting control of their destiny in their hands. Is definitely not going to be a walk in the park. However, it's one that we either attempt now or never. It will never be done by anyone. At least if one generation tries and fails, then the next generation definitely has a good chance to get it right, hopefully building on the failures and successes of the previous generation. So in terms of the threats to the success of this AcFTA and what can be done to really fix those threats, I would say a lot can go wrong. In fact, so much. A lot is actually an understatement, and I would rather keep it grossly understated at this point. I don't want to overstate it or put it to the right weight, because it's really a lot that can go wrong. But in the interest of moving things forward in the fastest and most effective way, I'll probably shift the question to ask, what can go right? What has gone right with all the initiatives that we have seen before the AfCFTA? Because a lot, like my friends commented, has gone right. They have definitely highlighted the real challenges, like the rule of law in Africa is a real challenge. The commitment to trade is a real challenge. As Sandra commented, you go sell fish in Mwanza, in Kenya or any part of Africa, and you don't get paid for your fish for days. As an accountant, of course, you make a provision for bad and doubtful debts, but that was not your business in the first instance to be realizing bad debts. And it's frustrating because then the reason why you went to buy the fish in that part of the continent is you obviously wanted to promote them as well as promote yourself and the people that you are serving as your segment market. So what could go right instead of what has gone right? I think there is that collective will and converged willpower and aspirations amongst the people in Africa, as well as other Africans outside Africa, for a strong and united Africa that has its destiny in its hands. I think we definitely have to use that willpower and aspiration positively, despite the challenges that face it. I've heard many people say that in Africa, we are probably the only people that probably need very little interaction with each other. We kind of naturally gravitate towards each other when there are problems. We want to help each other out. We definitely have that, socialism strongly built in us from the villages and from the families that are from back in Africa. Is very strong. So that collective thinking, we definitely have to use it well and really exploit it. In Kenya, we had the Harambee spirit, which meant pulling together. And that, if tapped properly, holds great potential. The AcFTA. The other thing that has gone very well is, like I mentioned, you're looking at Africa as a young and very well educated population, as well as a population that has great entrepreneurial culture. You see Sanda, for example, we get fish from Mwanza, bringing it to Kenya. We also have a very innovative culture in African people, especially the young ones who are not willing to settle down for, just the traditional jobs that we had our parents and previous generations doing. Try all sorts of innovations. They are more comfortable with failure. And we also have lots of availability of cheap labor, especially in the so-called weak economies. So you can look at them as weak economies or good for nothing economies, but you can also look at them at, hey, it's a big opportunity for trading and putting, industries there. You can produce goods and services more cheaply. It promises a great opportunity for the entrepreneur as well as the country itself and its people. And I think the other thing that really works for us in Africa is literally a market, great natural resources, a 1.3 billion strong population, young and energetic population, as well as the current trading we have in Africa. And I think mention of, for example, the East African community that collapsed in 1977, but we also have the success in West Africa, the SADC in Southern African countries. The question is, what can we learn from those people that can actually help us to move forward from where we are and succeed as a bloc? So I would say the challenges are there, as they have been very well outlined. I think in terms of perceptions and attitudes towards the political, generally Africans, we have a very poor attitude towards the political agreements. We probably have very low trust in politicians for good reasons. We also have the traditional colonial masters and their vested interests somewhere in the background and pulling strings from behind the scenes. We have issues with the infrastructure and bureaucracy, very poor rule of law. We have countries still thinking in the protectionist mode and thinking it's me, not really being able to think in terms of integration and being able to think in the long term. We have challenges in terms of corruption, and you can name them, and the list goes on and on and on. The factors against Africa are indeed a lot. But again, when you really look at the factors for Africa, I think it's a lot going for us, especially if you think even assuming we forget about everything else, just the great market potential that Africa holds for itself as well as for the rest of the world, in terms of having just a ready market, as well as a ready labor source, as well as having all the resources you need in the world to produce anything, probably for the entire universe. All those resources are to be found in Africa. So all we need is just to get organized. Can we get organized? I believe this answer is a strong yes. There's no reason why Africans cannot get organized. And I think it's important to then probably conclude and ask, so why are Africans not getting organized, or why haven't they gotten organized in the past? And in my mind, it's a culture paradigm shift that needs to happen in all of us between our minds. We change our attitudes and our thinking and our, the way we look at things. We start thinking in the medium term. as well as in the short term, and most importantly in the long term. What does the actions we take today mean for us, our future generations, 50 years to come, 100 years to come, 1,000 years to come, 10,000 years to come? I think that kind of change of mindset, I think that's going to change everything in terms of the way we look at getting organized today, tomorrow, the days to come. And that's the big mountain that we really have to climb. Change of mindset really is the big Mount Kilimanjaro for the AcFTA agreement, and the people of Africa really have to climb at this point. Once we climb that mountain, I think the rest, the job will be much easier to do. There will be cooperation around the process.
Thanks, Joel. And I think that those are really good observations that you make, and the potential that Africa has and what could come out of it. I think we will need to pick up this discussion a bit further next month. So because we intend to have like a discussion every month on Africa trade, especially keep track on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And these are very good observations that have been made on the challenges, like on the rule of law, especially, which is a real thing. And what Joel, you have also observed that there's potential, and you can look at what can be done right and change in mindset. And also, without also forgetting that we actually have turned around in the past, like we've turned around like with the EAC and everything that has happened. Thank you guys so much for joining in and sharing your insights on this. I will want to end it here, and then we will pick up, especially to mention more on like third party interference on the like Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is a real thing, and the ongoing almost global trade wars that are being observed in Africa, like the West and the East, and fighting for resources or to do some things in Africa, and the potential that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area could have to save on some of such things. But thank you so much, Biko, for joining in tonight, and Joel, thank you so much for joining in and your comments, and as well. And we will have more discussions in the future about this. Thanks a lot, guys.